Iran begins enriching uranium to 20% purity. Tehran, Iran said Monday it has resumed enriching uranium to 20% purity, exceeding limits set in a 2015 nuclear deal and slashing the time it would take for Tehran to produce the grade of fuel needed for a nuclear weapon. The nuclear activity, which returns Iran to an enrichment level it last reached before entering the international accord, dials up pressure on Washington and crosses a red line set by European countries that remained committed to the agreement after the Trump administration withdrew from it in 2018. The move threatens to complicate President-elect Joe Biden's plan to rejoin the deal that placed limits on Tehran's nuclear program, but which floundered after the U.S. left it and reimposed crippling economic sanctions on Tehran. Mr. Biden has said the U.S. would rejoin the deal as long as Iran complies with its terms. The enrichment activity also raises tensions in the Middle East when the region is already on edge during the waning days of the Trump administration. Tehran has vowed to avenge the killings of a top Iranian nuclear scientist in November and a senior Iranian general, who died in the U.S. drone strike last January. The strike followed a year of spiraling hostilities in the region that included explosions on oil tankers and an attack on Saudi oil facilities that the U.S. blamed on Iran. Tehran has denied involvement in the explosions and the Saudi attack. Iranian forces seized a South Korea-flagged ship on Monday, according to a semi-official Iranian news agency, heightening tensions with a U.S. ally. Forces boarded the vessel because it was creating unspecified pollution in the Persian Gulf, the agency said. The vessel's owner, DM Shipping of Busan, South Korea, didn't respond to calls. Tehran is in a dispute with South Korea over Seoul's refusal to unlock frozen oil revenue accounts to pay for COVID-19 vaccines and other humanitarian goods. Iran has previously seized vessels from countries with which it has had disputes. In 2019, Tehran detained a British-owned tanker for months after the UK seized an Iranian vessel that was on its way to Syria. An Iranian government spokesman defended on Monday the decision to lift the enrichment levels, saying it complied with a law passed by Parliament in December. President Hassan Rouhani had said he opposed the move, urging caution with respect to actions that could provoke hostilities with the West. The government finds itself obliged to carry out this law, said the spokesman, Ali Rabi. The enrichment is taking place at the Fordow nuclear facility beneath the mountain south of Tehran, he said. The heightened level of enrichment cuts the time it would take for Iran to create weapons-grade uranium, which is 90% enriched. Expert estimates vary for how long it would now take Iran to build a nuclear weapon, with some saying it would take at least a year. David Albright, a former weapons inspector and president of the Institute for Science and International Security, a security think tank in Washington, estimated that it would take a total of 6 to 9 months to build a nuclear explosive, prepare a test site and carry out a nuclear test. President Trump's withdrawal from the nuclear agreement reimposed economic sanctions on Tehran and launched an era of renewed hostilities with Iran and its allies in the Middle East. A U.S. State Department spokeswoman on Monday called Iran's move a clear attempt to increase its campaign of nuclear extortion, an attempt that will continue to fail. Iran told the International Atomic Energy Agency on December 31 that it planned to proceed with 20% enrichment, the agency has said. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi confirmed to member states on Monday that Iran began feeding uranium that was already enriched up to 4.1% into 6 centrifuge cascades at the Fordow facility for enrichment up to 20%. The agency said its inspectors were present at the nuclear site to detach the agency's seal from a cylinder containing the uranium supply. The increase in uranium enrichment levels accelerates Iran's approach, in which it had been gradually increasing uranium enrichment as it ramps up pressure on Western countries, reaching 4.5% purity last year. The 2015 deal limits Iran to 3.67% purity. The increased nuclear activity and the December 1 law that set it in motion could be designed to improve Iran's position in negotiations toward a revival of the 2015 nuclear deal under Mr. Biden, who will be inaugurated as president on January 20. Iran is trying to build as much leverage as it can between now and then, said Ariane Tabatabai, an Iran expert at the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund, a policy think tank. The point is to go back to 2016 without any preconditions. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the nuclear activity was in response to non-compliance by other members of the agreement. Our measures are fully reversible upon full compliance by all, he said on Twitter on Monday. Tensions between Iran and its opponents have soared since the killing of Iran's top nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who died in an attack on his car outside of Tehran in late November. Iranian leaders accuse Israel of carrying out the attack. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied any involvement. The assassination further unsettled the Middle East in a tense period as the region awaits the inauguration of Mr. Biden, who has vowed to change course on U.S. policy toward the region following years of a pressure campaign on Iran carried out by the Trump administration. The campaign included crippling economic sanctions and the January 2020 killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani, a senior leader in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the architect of Iran's alliances with powerful militia groups that enhance Tehran's influence across the Middle East. Iranian proxy groups in the region called for revenge attacks against Americans and their allies, particularly in Iraq, on the anniversary of Gen. Soleimani's death on January 3, which came and went without spectacular violence. These anniversaries are big. This is a way for Iran to mark them, to say we didn't engage in revenge that we would be taking, but we are doing things, said Ms. Tabatabai, referring to the uranium enrichment. Iran's accelerated nuclear activity also exposed fissures within Iran's political system over how to respond to the killings and U.S. led pressure on Tehran. President Rouhani, along with the country's foreign ministry and nuclear agency, criticized the law passed by Parliament on December 1, calling the legislation unnecessary. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei decides major national security questions. The law, which passed just days after the killing of Mr. Fakhrizadeh, also calls for Iran's nuclear agency to increase monthly production of low-enriched uranium to 500 kilograms from 150 kilograms. It also mandates that the country stop cooperating with the IAEA with 2 months, beyond what is required by safety protocols, unless banking and oil sanctions are lifted. Trump withdraws U.S. from Iran accord. Washington, the U.S. is exiting the Iranian nuclear accord, President Donald Trump said Tuesday, dismantling his predecessor's most prominent foreign policy initiative and bucking the appeals of some of America's closest allies. Speaking in the diplomatic room of the White House, Mr. Trump delivered harsh words about the 2015 deal to curb and monitor Iran's nuclear activity, calling it horrible, one-sided and disastrous. The president said he planned to institute sanctions against Iran, and said the U.S. would sanction any nation that helps Tehran pursue nuclear weapons, as well as U.S. and foreign companies and banks that continue to do business with the country. After an 11-minute televised speech explaining his decision, Mr. Trump sat down at a desk and signed an order withdrawing the U.S. from the pact as Vice President Mike Pence, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin and National Security Advisor John Bolton looked on from across the room. Administration officials said the Iran sanctions suspended under the agreement snapped immediately back into effect, meaning any new contracts and financial deals are banned. They said businesses and banks have either 90 or 180 days to wind down existing ties, depending on the particular type of transaction. While it pleased Israel and Saudi Arabia, Mr. Trump's decision injected a new source of strain into tense transatlantic ties. In a strongly worded joint statement, the leaders of Britain, France and Germany rejected the president's conclusion, announced they were still committed to the nuclear agreement and urged Iran to stay in compliance.
Armed Iranian troops boarded South Korean tanker, ship's owner says. The owner of a South Korean flagged tanker which was seized by Iran in the Persian Gulf on Monday has described how armed soldiers boarded the vessel. The crew of the Hankook Chemi tanker received a 10 to 20 minute warning from Iranian authorities before the ship was boarded by troops, its owner, DM Shipping Co. Limited, told CNN in a statement Tuesday. The company said its communication with the tanker was cut off as soon as the ship was seized. 5 South Korean nationals are among the 20 civilian mariners aboard the tanker, the South Korean Foreign Ministry said. Iran's ambassador to Seoul told the South Korean government that the sailors who were on board are safe, South Korean officials said in a media briefing Tuesday. Seoul dispatched an acclaimed anti-piracy unit to the Strait of Hormuz following the tanker's seizure. The Gyeonggi unit, which includes South Korean special forces, arrived in the strait on Tuesday aboard the 5,000-ton destroyer Choyong, according to the South Korean Defense Ministry. Tensions in the Persian Gulf have increased in the past week, near the one-year anniversary of the deadly U.S. strike on Qasem Soleimani, a top Iranian general. The U.S. has flown B-52 bombers over the region, and on Sunday U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier, which was due to rotate home, to remain there. Then on Monday, Iranian boats seized the Hankook Chemi as it transited the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow entrance to the Persian Gulf from the Arabian Sea. Iran said the vessel was seized for creating environmental and chemical pollution in the Persian Gulf, the semi-official news agency Tasnim said. The vessel has been seized by the Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to the Mehr news agency. But following the tanker's seizure, an Iranian government spokesman claimed that 2 years ago South Korea had frozen $7 billion of Iranian funds which were currently held in a South Korean bank. We hope the South Korean government will unblock the frozen money as soon as possible, Ali Rabiei said Tuesday on Iranian state television. Choi Young-sam, a spokesman for South Korea's foreign ministry, said Tuesday that the South Korean government is in close communication with counterparts in Tehran and is trying to secure the release of the sailors and the vessel. There was no suggestion the Gyeonggi unit would be undertaking a rescue operation, with the Defense Ministry saying it would be advising other South Korean flagged vessels in the area on safety. Established in 2009 as South Korea's first overseas anti-piracy force, the Gyeonggi unit had been deployed to the Gulf of Aden, between Somalia and Yemen, to help maintain the free movement of South Korean vessels through the region. Almost a year ago, the unit's area of operations was expanded to include the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, about 1,800 kilometers. 1,118 miles, to the east, as tensions spiked in the region. That expansion came after officials in the U.S., a key South Korean ally, asked for help in safeguarding international shipping in the region, although Seoul stopped short of joining a U.S. coalition to protect the route. Yet the unit has pulled off rescues of South Korean nationals in the region before, most notably in 2011, off the coast of Somalia. In that action, commandos from the Gyeonggi unit stormed a South Korean tanker that had been hijacked along with its crew of 21 by a gang of Somali pirates. The commandos killed 8 pirates and captured 5 others, according to the South Korean Defense Ministry. None of the tanker's crew died. The Gyeonggi unit also freed South Korean nationals captured by pirates on a Singapore-flagged merchant ship in 2012 and supported the evacuation of South Korean nationals from Yemen in 2015, the government said. In its statement on Tuesday, the Hankook Chemi's owner said it was in contact with the South Korean consulate in Tehran and expected more information later in the day. The company added that it has asked its protection and indemnity insurance (P&I) club to investigate the seizure. The insurance club is expected to dispatch an investigator to Iran to check on the safety of the crew and to examine Iran's claim that the tanker was seized due to environmental contamination. South Korean forces arrive in waters near Strait of Hormuz amid Iran tensions. South Korean forces have arrived in waters near the Strait of Hormuz as pressure builds on Iran to free a South Korean tanker it seized along with its crew on Monday. Iran's Revolutionary Guards said they had taken control of the South Korean vessel, the Hankook Chemi, and its 20 crew because it was polluting the Persian Gulf with chemicals. The tanker is being held at Iran's Bandar Abbas port city. The Choyong, a destroyer carrying members of the Gyeonggi anti-piracy unit, arrived in the strategically important area on Tuesday, as officials in Seoul sought a diplomatic solution to the standoff. Officials stressed there were no plans to conduct a military operation to free the crew of 5 South Koreans, 11 Myanmarese, 2 Indonesians and 2 Vietnamese, according to the Yonhap news agency. Iran seizes South Korean tanker as tensions with U.S. Mount Readmore, the destroyer, is carrying out missions to ensure the safety of our nationals, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Boo Seung-chan said on Tuesday. An unnamed official told Yonhap, the issue should be resolved through diplomacy. The unit is focused on the safety of our people who use the waterway after the seizure. The Hankook Chemi's owner said on Tuesday that Revolutionary Guard troops had stormed the vessel and forced it to change course and travel to Iran. That account contradicts Iranian claims that the ship had been stopped for polluting the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The South Korean foreign minister, Kang Kyung-hwa, did not comment directly on speculation that Tehran had seized the vessel to pressure Seoul into releasing billions of dollars of Iranian assets frozen in South Korea as part of U.S. sanctions against the regime. Kang said her priority was to verify the facts and ensure the safety of the crew members. She added, "We have been trying to figure out what happened through the Iranian embassy in South Korea and the South Korean embassy in Iran and are continuing to make efforts to address the situation." There was confusion over plans to send a senior South Korean official to Iran this weekend to negotiate the vessel's release. Iranian state TV cited a Tehran government official as saying that the vice foreign minister, Choi Jong-kun, had been due to discuss Iran's demand that $7 billion in frozen funds be released. However, a foreign ministry official in Seoul told Reuters that Choi's visit was unclear as of now. Last Sunday, the Tehran Times newspaper reported Iran was hoping to negotiate an agreement to use the frozen funds to barter for coronavirus vaccine doses and other commodities. The Revolutionary Guards said on Monday the Hankook Chemi, which was carrying 7,200 tons of ethanol, was seized by our forces, Navy, this morning. They added, this tanker was headed from Saudi Arabia's Al Jubail port and was seized due to the repeated infringement of maritime environmental laws.